Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the chapter in your social studies textbook that's talking about the early French communities. So it starts on page 104. This is not the first time I recorded this video, but every time I've recorded it, it's been longer than I wanted it to be. So I'm going to try to just tell you the main points, but you may want to go in, if you have this book, if they mailed it to you, and read it. If not, you do have access to it by clicking the link, because this is really good stuff. And they took a lot of time period and put it in a short little space. And I'm going to add some stuff to it too, because I want you to know how this affected Arkansas, because you live in the state called Arkansas. So here I have a picture of the United States, and up above it is another country called Canada. And there's a red box showing you where the French first came. France is a country, and we call the people French. We talked before last week about the Spanish, and they had come, you can't even hardly see it, down into this area down south where my finger is. But the French came up here. But they didn't stay up there, okay? They actually went on some expeditions or trips. Trips with a purpose. And they traveled through the river systems that are all across North America. You've probably seen a river before. We have lots of rivers, okay? One of the rivers they traveled down is called the Mississippi, the mighty Mississippi, okay? Now, it's hard to see the Mississippi right here, but you can see where it says Mississippi River, and all this looks really confusing, but I'm going to show you Arkansas is right in this area here. This is about where Arkansas would be. And the Mississippi River is beside Arkansas, okay? And so if we drove across Arkansas and went into Tennessee, we would have to go across a bridge to go across the Mississippi, which is the longest river in the whole United States, okay? The French traveled down the Mississippi, and the French were really friendly with the Native Americans. They were friends. So Richard, remember you said you would be a peacemaker? They were peacemakers. They liked to do trades with the Native Americans. And you know what a trade is, right? You've traded things before. Maybe you have Takis and your friend has a cupcake and you like Takis, but you'd rather have a cupcake and your friend wants your Takis. So you trade. You give him the Takis and you take the cupcake, okay? So that they would trade, but they wouldn't do Takis and cupcakes. They had their own things that they would trade with the Native Americans, and they were really friendly. They would establish these things called post, P-O-S-T, post. The post were like little villages would probably be the best word. A village is like a small town or city, a village, but we call them post. And a post is a village that is there so that people can trade things. People can buy things, but they don't always buy them with money. Sometimes they buy them by saying, I'm going to give you something you want that I have. I have a book and you want a book, and you have something I want. Let's trade. They would do that at a post. Well, the French would set these posts up. Well, the French liked it in Arkansas because they liked the Quapaw. We talked about them last week a little bit. They liked the Quapaw, the Native American group called the Quapaw. Arkansas was named for them, okay? They liked the Quapaw, so they settled in Arkansas. They made a post called Arkansas Post. That's Arkansas's first city, if you want to call it a city. It didn't have big size skyscrapers, so don't think about that. Just a few little homes, really. And they settled in Arkansas Post and made a little village there. Now, they made other ones all around, especially in Louisiana. The King of France really, really was excited about Arkansas Post because he thought we can grow crops there. And in Louisiana, sometimes we can't grow crops. So he really, really was hopeful that Arkansas Post would be good for France because we would be able to, because the French, not we, the French would be able to grow crops, but they couldn't grow crops. They didn't have very much luck with that. And so they kind of gave up on that and made it more like a military type base where they put their soldiers, and they did different things with it over the years. So it started off like for trading, and then they wanted it for farming, but it didn't really work. So then it was for military. And you can visit it today and learn the history of Arkansas Post. Okay. But the French and the people were living kind of all in this area here, and they wanted to own this land. Now, remember, I told you the Native Americans already lived on the land. You learned that there were, like, for instance, the Iroquois lived in this area up here, along with a bunch of other groups. But some of the Native Americans didn't think about it like, I own this land. So they didn't really want to own they wanted to stay on the land. But the British settlers, we'll call them, wanted to own the land, and the French wanted to own the land. So they actually went to war to try to own this land. I'm not talking about a war like the Revolutionary War. I'm talking about a war. It's actually called the French and Indian War. Now, the reason it's called the French and Indian War, remember I told you the French and the Native Americans, or the Indians, the French and the Indians were very friendly. So that I think the French and the Indians fought together, and maybe some people thought that was kind of strange, so they call it the French and Indian War, even though the Indians, they didn't all help the French. Of course, there were Native Americans on both sides of the war. The French lost, and the English got to live on that land. And you guys know the history because the United States won their freedom from the British. And so you guys know that means that the British won. But the French kind of went out and lived out over here on the side of the Mississippi. And eventually in 1803, the United States wanted that land too. But the next time we bought the land. We paid for it in 1803. We paid 3 cents an acre. Now, there were Native Americans living here because we had kind of, the ones that lived over here, we had kept saying, move over, move over, move over. But we did buy this land from the French, not from the Native Americans. We bought it from the French. And Napoleon, you might have heard of Napoleon, he was the leader of France in 1803. He sold it to us. Okay? And so Arkansas is part of that land. Okay, so Arkansas was part of the Louisiana Purchase. That's how Arkansas became part of the United States. The land that the French owned, they sold and to the United States, and that's how we became part of the Union.